Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is establish. Let's look at a few definitions. The first way you might hear the word establish used is to set up an organization, a system, etc., on a firm or permanent basis. So you might hear of certain companies establishing operations. So it's another way to say they're starting business. You might also hear about rules being established. That all matches that first definition. Another meaning you might hear with establish is to achieve permanent acceptance or recognition for. This meaning might be more common in academic settings. So in particular fields of study, new research, new theories might use this verb establish to talk about the origins and acceptance of these new ideas and theories. Finally, another way you might hear the verb establish used is to show something to be true or certain by determining the facts. If you follow judicial or news about our criminal investigation system, or you watch maybe TV shows that involve courts, you might hear this word establish being used. So prosecutors, for example, will try and establish that a particular person was present at the time a crime was committed. So that's another way you might hear it. Establish is a regular verb. To make the progressive form, all you need to do is add ing to the end, and you have establishing. The past tense and participle forms are formed by adding ed to the end. Because this verb ends with a voiceless sh sound, the ed is going to make a t sound. Established, established. Today, I only have one phrasal verb for you, and that's establish in. Its meaning is pretty similar to the first definition we looked at, but specifically it means to place or cause someone or something to settle firmly. And I actually saw this verb used in a headline recently, and that's going to be our example sentence. Invasive lizards have established themselves in Georgia. So this particular article was about a species of lizards that is more typically found in South America, but now they've discovered many, not just one, but many of these types of lizards now in the U.S. state of Georgia. I will point out that you might also see establish in and then a date, like a year. That's also pretty common when businesses might be describing when they started their operations. Today, we're going to look again at the differences between active and passive voice. And I thought it might be helpful to revisit some of the notes we talked about earlier this week. So you'll remember in active voice, we start the sentence with the person or the thing that is responsible for the action. So that might be the person doing the action or the thing that's doing the action. And I have two sample sentences here. Mike cleaned the house. Jen planted vegetables. In both of those sentences, I know who is doing each action. Mike is responsible for cleaning. Jen is responsible for planting. Passive voice sentences, though, are going to begin with the person or the thing that was acted on. Or another way you might hear that described, that received the action. The person who did the action may not be in the sentence, or you might see that person or thing at the end of the sentence following the preposition by. So I've taken the two active sentences and I've changed them to passive voice. The house was cleaned. Could put a period there, and that would be a perfectly fine sentence. Or I could say, the house was cleaned by mine. Could say, vegetables were planted. Or could say, vegetables were planted by Jen. It's more common to see active voice, and we generally encourage people to write in active voice so that it's clear to your audience who is responsible for this action. But there are times where it's appropriate to use passive voice. We might use it when we don't know who is responsible for the action. We could also use it when the person that is doing the action just isn't that important. Because perhaps we really want to emphasize the object or the person or thing that's being acted on. That's more important. So that's why we're starting our sentence with that information. Today, I would like us to use our verb of the day, establish, in present perfect, and we're going to compare active voice to passive voice. And I want you to know my passive voice sentences are all things that I saw in the news this week. And I actually sometimes had to do a little more reading to figure out who was responsible for the action so I could create the active voice sentences. But let's start with active voice in the present perfect. To make that verb tense, we're going to use have or has, and then our participle form of the verb. So you might remember, if our subject is he, she, or it, we'll use has. And if our subject is I, you, we, or they, we'll use have. So here's an example of the present perfect in active voice. The United Way of Central Iowa has established a public hotline for questions about COVID-19 in Iowa. Okay. If we want to change this to passive voice, we're going to continue using have or has. Then we'll use been, B-E-E-N. That's our participle form of be, and then the participle form of the verb. So this might seem funny to you. We have two participles, but that's the way we do passive voice in the present perfect. So here's the same sentence that, again, I saw in a newspaper article. A public hotline has been established for questions about COVID-19 in Iowa. Okay. So here, the reason I would say the writer probably chose not to mention who had created the hotline was that the writer really wants us readers to focus on the hotline and that it exists. It has been started. It has been established. Next, let's look at negative. To make present perfect active voice in a negative statement, we need to add not after the has or have. Okay? And then we'll have the participle form. So here's an example. Leaders haven't established the details yet. For the present perfect, in passive voice, we're going to do something very similar. We're going to add not right after the have or has, and then we'll have been, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's that example. The details haven't been established yet. Finally, let's look at a yes or no question. To make our yes or no question, we're going to move have or has to the beginning of the sentence, then we'll have our subject, then our participle. Has the company established an opening date? If we want to ask that same question but in passive voice, we're going to start with have or has. Then we have the person or thing that is receiving the action. Then been, then our participle. Has an opening date been established? Finally, today, let's look at some words that are connected to our verb establish. The first is a noun. It's establishment. And this word can have several different meanings. It could reference just any company or business organization. Here is an example of that. Restaurants and other eating establishments may resume business. Again, this is something that I saw in a newspaper article this week. By using that word establishments, they're also perhaps suggesting here coffee shops, ice cream shops, right? Things that might not technically feel like a restaurant, but are closely related to that type of business. A second meaning for establishment is the action of establishing something or being established. Okay? So many times this is another way to reference the beginning, the starting of something. The establishment of a new airline will resume after the pandemic. A final way you might hear establishment used is to mean an influential group within a specified profession or area of activity. Here is an example of that. The medical establishment believes a vaccine will be ready in 18 months. Let's end with another related verb to our verb of the day, establish, and that is re-establish. You might recognize that prefix re as meaning again, and that will help you figure out the meaning of this verb. So its meaning is to establish something again or to establish something anew. And my example sentence, again, is something I think I heard while watching some news this week. Owners hope to re-establish their businesses in the community. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Have a great day.